The narrative here is pretty simple. Biden goes to a state that then is going to go red by one of the largest margins in any of our lives and into a county that may flip red for the first time. They are setting him up for an incredible failure here. There are places he could go. I would argue maybe he needs to be in New York, where Lee Zeldin is surging, and maybe there's enough traditional Democrat support that Joe Biden there could help. Maybe he needs to go out to California or Oregon or Washington, where all sorts of candidates are surging.
Joe Biden is going to be speaking in Florida in an effort to make it seem. Keep in mind that the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, is going up to New York to help Lee Zeldin. Side note, Lee Zeldin is currently in a Trafalgar poll, most recent one, just a little bit, 48% to 47% with 4% undecided. Lee Zeldin is actually showing up now ahead in polls, statistically tied, but ahead if you had to put your finger on it. No one's saying DeSantis has made some big error by going up to New York because he's going to win by double digits. What the heck is Joe Biden doing going to Florida to show what, I mean, this is what his little advisors are apparently saying, MAGA dystopia looks like. No taxes and sunshine? What is he talking about?
Hey, everybody, we're excited for election night, as many of you are as well. We're going to be having an incredible party in Nashville, and we want you to be able to hang out with us as a part of our VIP family.
So all you got to do is sign up, become a Clay and Buck VIP, and you can stream and join us. Some of your favorite people are going to be there, too. It's going to be an election night bonanza. We'll see you then.
Well, it just continues the theme of how tone deaf the Biden White House is on this closing sprint. And, Buck, we know they don't have good arguments to make because they failed on inflation in the economy. They failed on the border. They failed on crime. They failed on COVID. They failed on keeping us out of a near world war in Europe. But of all the places you could travel to argue in favor of any of your policies, the state of Florida, where Ron DeSantis is going to win by 10, and Buck, he might win by 15 points, which would be the largest win that any Republican has had statewide in a modern era. And all Biden is doing is setting himself up for embarrassment. He's going to Miami, and the expectation is that Ron DeSantis may win Miami-Dade County, which is an incredible sea change fueled to a large extent by Hispanic voters who are overwhelmingly rejecting Democrats. So the narrative here is pretty simple. Biden goes to a state that then is going to go red by one of the largest margins in any of our lives and into a county that may flip red for the first time. They are setting him up for an incredible failure here. There are places he could go. I would argue maybe he needs to be in New York, where Lee Zeldin is surging, and maybe there's enough traditional Democrat support that Joe Biden there could help. Maybe he needs to go out to California or Oregon or Washington, where all sorts of candidates are surging. As we were speaking, the Cook Political Report, Buck, just flipped 10 more districts in blue states in the direction of Republicans. So we're talking about not only a potential red wave, but a red wave that is sweeping through many states that are overwhelmingly blue. And in particular, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, the Wall Street Journal has a great piece up today, Buck, where they're discussing suburban women are overwhelmingly rejecting now the Democrat Party. They are moving into the Republican camp. We saw the beginnings of this last year with the big win that we had in Virginia. But when you actually break down this continuing, Buck, it reminds me of when I called you in August. I see this every day where I live. There are so many mad moms. Heidi Ganal came on with us in Colorado, and the mad mom thing has trended for several days since she said, yeah, you're right, I'm a mad mom, over COVID, over crime, over what kids are being taught in schools. There's a lot of moms who are fed up and they're not going to take it anymore. And I think they're going to take it out on Democrats in a way that Democrats still don't even recognize.
Suburban women and Hispanic voters do seem to be the X factor here, the difference maker in a lot of these states that are now in play, or races that are now in play, depending, that have Democrats really shook. I mean, the fact that you have we've had Tiffany Smiley on. We've got Zeldin on tomorrow. Tiffany Smiley on tomorrow as well. So Zeldin running for governor of New York. I've said it before. I just keep saying it. I'm trying to manifest it at some level, but I do believe it. I believe Lee Zeldin is going to win, and it will be among the biggest, if not the biggest, upsets of a massive red tsunami year. But the fact that Tiffany Smiley, who's run a very effective campaign as the concerned mom, right? Tiffany Smiley's doing this. Christine Drazen is doing this. I think the media,
Tudor
I know they're
Dixon,
talking about
Heidi Ganahl. There are lots of these moms that are just fed up, and I think are resonating nationwide.
And you see I think, 30-year incumbent in the Senate in Washington State. That shouldn't even be a discussion. I mean, Tiffany Smiley's race there in a normal political year, and absent, she's very likable. She's got a lot going for her as a candidate. And the candidates, this is where we start. You go back to the basics, right? It's all going to come down to turnout, and the candidates matter. And, you hear these cliches, but they're true. That's why they're cliches. She's run a good campaign, but this shouldn't even be a question, right? I mean, Washington State, that's a blue place. Look at Seattle and what's going on there in recent years. But Clay, I think for a lot of people, there's a combination of two things that are coming together right now. This election is a referendum on whether results matter, right? The policy, cause, and effect. Do you care? Some people don't care. Some people, if it's about, abortion and, women's reproductive health and the insurrection, and it doesn't matter. I mean, the inflation could be 50%. They just don't care, right? For people who care, though, about results, what did you promise? What did you give us? They're all dropping for Republicans right now and leaving the Democrat Party. And that also ties into the other part of this that I think comes with the whole conversation, which is the bait and switch here. Right? Biden, you and I remember this. Biden came in. It was, it's going to be normal. I'm good old Joe. We're going to have a booming economy, grow from the middle out. It's going to be awesome. Anybody who went along with that, who has looked at that objectively, has to say, we are basically swindled. And they're pissed off, and they should be.
And I don't think you can overlook, Buck, that COVID has its tendrils in each of these major issues, too, right? If you look at inflation and the economy, the result of this inflation was the COVID spending. If you look at the crime, certainly I think you can make a connection between George Floyd and BLM and the protests that ensued during COVID and the way that they were handled. I think that's connected. We know the border because they've had all these different policies in place that have allowed the border to be wide open. I think that COVID sort of undergirds all of these, because we talk about inflation, the economy, Buck. We talk about crime. We talk certainly about what's going on at the border. But looming sort of underneath as a foundational element of all of those things going wrong is COVID and the lockdowns and school shutdowns. And I think it just motivates an angry base of many people out there that are asking themselves the question, is your life better now than it was when Joe Biden took over in January of 2020? From a financial perspective and everything else, for virtually everyone in the country, the answer is no. Almost everyone in the country is in a worse spot than they were 2 years ago when Joe Biden came in. And that's why this election, ultimately, I'm still surprised they've got Biden out, not only going to Florida, Buck, but even making the arguments that he is, because ultimately this election's a referendum on Biden. And Democrats have done everything to try to make it a referendum on something else, on MAGA, on January 6th, on
threats
Trump,
to democracy.
And they failed. Yeah, they failed in a major way to shift that story. It's just not abortion, just not working.
And that they are now going to Florida, I think shows a tone deafness. I think that Biden making this, I believe, his last, or certainly close to his last. He's only got a few days. It may, in fact, be his last official campaign stop. It's one of the last, if it's not the final one. And he'd go into Florida which for so many Republicans and for independents, and just based on the numbers of people moving here, has become this beacon of better governance than what you have in blue states. I mean, that's effectively.
Yes.
I'm hoping Zeldin wins so he can turn New York around because I love New York. You know, the same way you love sports and don't want to just cede the sports narrative to the lunatic left sports media.
Yeah.
I love New York. I don't want it to just turn into some, third world hellhole because the Democrats have destroyed it. So I want to see it turn around. I want to see that happen. Florida for people is a success narrative, though, certainly over the last couple of years. There's no question when you look at the numbers. And that Biden comes here, it just reminds me that, Clay, the Democrats have just been running god-awful campaigns. It really is like they don't even talk to the people they seek to govern. They just want to tell them what to do. It's like they don't know what's going on. The out-of-touchness with Main Street, something that Joe Biden, the folks in Main Street, not a joke. He has no idea what is going on. If he thinks that Florida is where he should be going right now.
And it's certainly not Biden because he's clueless. But his advisors are failing him in a major way, and they're setting him up for embarrassment and, frankly, ridicule because I think there would be more people apt to show up in Florida to rally against Biden by far in all of his policies than would want to show up to support anything that he says.
And none of these things are by accident. When Biden did his interview just a few days ago with transgender activist Dylan Mulvaney. Is that right?
I think that's right.
That's right, yeah. That's that in the final days before the midterm election, Joe Biden's going to be saying, it's awesome that you've just transitioned and are now saying you're a girl and you're explaining womanhood. Think about this. That individual, Mulvaney, is explaining what it is to be a woman to women who have a little more experience. Didn't just happen for a few months ago, and Biden is blessing this, interviewing this person at the White House. Is that what steel workers in Pittsburgh thought they were signing on for, Clay? Is that what the union guys in Michigan and the suburban soccer moms in Georgia, is that what they thought they were getting with this White House? I don't think so.